Hello, my name is Tim Remmers, and in this tutorial I want to show you the workflow I use to make a low poly version by doing retopology in 3ds Max with the ribbon tool. And for this tutorial I'm using 3ds Max 2017. This will also work in future versions of 3ds Max and in a few older versions as well. As long as the ribbon tool is in 3ds Max, this will work. So the first thing I did was importing my high poly model from, in this case, Zbrush to 3ds Max. Exporting from Zbrush to 3ds Max is something I might explain in a later tutorial, but it's relatively simple if you use to Zbrush. You export this as a FBX or OBJ and import it in 3ds Max. Before exporting the tool from Zbrush to 3ds Max, I decimated the model so it has a lot less triangles and will hit the performance a little bit less. So we're going to turn this sculpt in a usable low poly game asset, and for that we need to retopology this. So the first thing we will do is we will grab a plane. We can just drag this here. We just need some basic geometry to start working with. Set this to 1. We just need one polygon and position this close to the object you want to retopologize. So with that object selected, we will turn this into a editable poly. Right click and convert to editable poly, and now we have the geometry we can work with. Next step is to open the ribbon tool. You can click the toggle ribbon tool in here. By default it's on freeform for me, but it might start here in modeling. So make sure to go to freeform first, and here this is the toolbar we are going to use the most. With the low poly plane selected, we will turn this into a surface because we want to snap the vertices to a surface and not to the grid. So change this to draw on surface, and now we will pick the high poly surface, in this case the little armor piece, and as you can see it's selected shoulder pad. The offset, let's set that to 0.1 for now. We might change that later. That's literally the offset of the vertices from the high poly object. Alright, so now this plane and this shoulder pad are connected. To retopologize this, we're going to use these three functions here: step build, extend, and optimize. And extend and optimize will be used the most. To get started, let's open up the extend mode. In the extend mode we can extend the vertices and the edges to make some new geometry. Hover over a vertex and hold Shift, Control and Alt to move a vertex around the surface. So as you can see, it snaps to the surface with an offset of 0.1 when you move the vertex. So, and as you can see now, it is a little bit too close to the surface. So let's reposition this a little bit and increase the offset to 0.5. That's better. So we will, the low poly will be used to bake the high poly details onto the low poly model. So the low poly model must be pretty close to the high poly surface. Cool, so in the extend mode you have several options. While holding Shift, this one is one we're going to use a lot. So while holding shift and dragging an edge, we can create a new polygon here. So, and I reposition again with shift, control and alt. Cool, so holding shift and dragging this out to create some new geometry. And as you can see, this is already pretty fast. And we will do the same on this side. Let's reposition these a little bit. And we can create a new one. Still I'm only using the shift button for now. And let's go around this spiky shape. Like that. There we go. So, now we have the next few options. So, Control Shift to drag an edge to extend the entire loop on which the edge resides. So, Control Shift, and we can do an entire loop. That can be useful in some occasions, but we're not going to use that here. Control and Alt, this one is pretty important for me, and that is bridging. So when you hold Control and Alt, you click and drag to the next polygon. Let's show it here, might be a little bit better. Control Alt, click and drag, and it will connect these two. Also works here for triangles, so Control Alt to fill in this triangle. In this case, just by holding nothing and click and drag, you create this new polygon here. Click and drag in this corner to create a new one like that. And again here, holding Control and clicking remove vertices or polygons is also important. And in this case we can Control Alt to fill this in again. So it's important to note that when you create a polygon like this, make sure you start in the corner between two borders you want to start from, because if we click here, it will get the algorithm will connect some vertices you maybe don't want. So in this case, if I want to fill in this object, I start here and drag a line there. And in this case, I can start here, drag a line there, holding Shift again, and create a new poly loop from an edge. Holding nothing, click and drag. Just try to play around with that to create some geometry. Now, as you can see, there is no edge here. That is because I started a polygon and I continued from the polygon next to it. In this case, we can go to Optimize, and Optimize has a few nice functions. The one I use the most is use control to drag between the vertices to connect them with the edges. So I hover over this vertex, hold Control, click and drag so it creates an edge here. So this is important for stuff like this. A polygon exists from two triangles, as you can see here. This is one polygon and there's one triangle here and there's one triangle here. So 3ds Max decides, okay, there is a line from this vertex to this vertex, but so this line is always there. Although you don't see it directly, there it is there, because a polygon exists from multiple triangles. If we want to change that, if we want to change the direction of the polygon, we can use the optimize tool to connect it like this. So as you can see, in this case it's not good for the model because it sticks through, but in some cases it might be better. So for example, here there's a square polygon, but as you can see in the shading, the line is from this point to that point. And maybe if we look at this shape, we want to connect it like this. So we're not creating a polygon, but we are just rearranging the edge from the polygon. And again, in the optimize mode, just hold Shift Control Alt to move the vertices. Okay, so the topology here is a mess right now. So we're going to remove that. And again, here are all the options you can use with the optimize tool. You can weld some together. That's really useful as well. If we want to optimize this and hold Shift and drag these to each other, we can weld them together. That's really powerful. And yeah, you should just play around with that. If you think, I can't control this to the full extent, there's a big chance there is an option to do that within these three. Okay, so let me show you the finished shoulder part. I did the finished low poly asset. Let's delete the high poly one. So this is not super low poly. What I did is I traced the shapes of the spikes, so you can see the spike here and you see the spike here. So let's see how many triangles this has. Let's go to statistics, triangle count, and show statistics in the active view. Apply that, and now we can see that. So it's 878 polygons, almost 1600 triangles. It is still a little bit high, but this is fine for more high-end games. If we want to turn this into a really low poly asset, I can show you that. But before I do that, I will explain a little bit about the step build mode, which I'm personally not using a lot, but can be really powerful in some occasions. You can just click on the surface while selecting the step build to place these vertices around on the surface, and hold Shift and drag to create a polygon out of that. So again, click to set the vertex one by one and hold Shift and drag to create a polygon. So as you can see, this can be really powerful, but I personally prefer the extend mode. So let's remove that and retopologize this into a very low object. let's go to extend. We just need the general shape in this case. So okay, let's keep the edge. Switch to optimize, make a triangle here. Fill in this shape here. Optimize. Shift and drag. Okay, so it is possible to make it even more low poly, but then I think it's not that that pretty anymore. Okay, and extend, Control Alt to connect these two, and this is no, let's do it like this. There's a lot of planning involved actually in making the retopology. So you have to keep in mind what the end result is going to be. What is the approximate poly count you want to achieve? What are some details you want in the low poly? So in this case I want this corner here. But as you can see, that turns into some triangles. I'm not sure if I want those. Click and drag. Let's connect this by click and drag, and then go to optimize and weld these together. Okay, let's do it like that. And let's include the inside part as well. We don't need a lot of polygons here on the inside because that will be on the character shoulder, right? Okay, so as you can see, I'm only working on one side of the object, because I'm going to mirror this to the other side, because it's mainly symmetrical, the design. If the design isn't symmetrical, obviously this is not going to work. You need to do it manually then. Alright, so let's hide this. This is a very low poly version of what we did. Okay, let's align this center up. We're just going out of optimize mode. Let's hide this for a second and select everything on the x-axis. So there are multiple ways of doing this, but the most easiest way is just to select this and scale them all to one line. Go to the move and move this to 0 by just right clicking these arrows. There we go. So now this is on 0. Oh, here is a good example where we want to flip the vertex. There we go. Alright, to mirror this, the pivot needs to be in the center. So in this case the pivot is offset here. So let's reposition that. So if we going to mirror this, you can do that multiple ways again. You can use this mirror tool as a copy, and as you can see it mirrors along the pivot, and the pivot isn't correct, so it mirrors it wrong. And you can do this manually with an offset, but it's not what you want. You can use the symmetry modifier that's here in the drop down menu, symmetry. Also this is on the pivot and the normal of your pivot. So in this case the mirror is positioned like that. So everything is around this pivot. So let's reset that. First thing we will do is reset the X-form. So that's reset basically everything on the model and renders it as is. As you can see, there isn't any changes, but as you can see when we do the symmetry right now, it is aligned on the correct axis. So that's one of the parts that is reset. Okay, so now let's go to the hierarchy tab and effective pivot only. So now we can change the pivot without changing the position of the model. We can just set this to 0, 0, 0 and deselect that. And if we go back to the modify tab, we can use the symmetry tool, and now it is mirrored. If you want to change something, you go back to editable poly and you can click this to show the end result. So in this case we can change one side and it mirrors it to the other side as well. So it can come in really handy. And if you're done with this, you can collapse that, and now it is one object. Alright, cool. So the next thing to do, now we have a low poly model, is to unwrap this low poly model, export this to Substance Painter, for example, and start texturing this. But that will be something for the next tutorial. So I hope this was useful for you. Make sure to subscribe for more tutorials like this. I'm planning a lot of mini tutorials for Substance Painter, 3ds Max and Zbrush. So let me know in the comments if there is anything specific you'd like to know about this workflow. And yeah, see you next time. Thanks for watching.